Hi, welcome to another edition of the Josie to Lagos podcast, now in video and audio on all platforms that matter. Today we are going to be reacting to the online interaction which was held by the US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and YALI alumni. So before we go into the reaction, we want to welcome Awande Zwane, LLB IR honors, Wits University. You better recognize business lady and wonderful person all around. So she's joining us for another discussion on all issues Africa. So we're happy to have you on. I'm Mighty Jamie. If you're just tuning in for the first time, welcome. So we're reacting to this YALI event, US Secretary of State event. But just to break it down so that everyone understands what's up. YALI is the Young African Leadership Initiative. It was launched in 2010 under Barack Obama with the idea that America was going to help Africa develop its next generation of leaders. So this particular event that we're reacting to was happening on the 10th anniversary of this YALI initiative being launched. So it's not a Barack Obama initiative, it's a US initiative under the Secretary of State Department, which is the department that deals with foreign affairs from an American perspective to protect and advance American interests around the world. So YALI is one of the initiatives that they do, Young African Leaders Initiative, and they've had 25,000 alumni up until this point. So basically they've got some programs that they run in America under the Mandela Washington Fellowship, yes. And then they've got some programs that they run regionally in their regional leadership centers. And then you apply. It's quite a long process. And if you're under 35, you can still apply if you're interested in that. So this seminar happened. It was an hour long. There were 10 questions for Anthony Blinken. And we're going to react to 3 of those questions because we think they exemplify some of the issues that happened in that particular discussion. But before we go into the questions specifically, I wonder, what are your thoughts about the whole thing, or even YALI? Where you at?
So just commenting on the video, the virtual conference itself, it seemed a lot like a PR thing, whereas I think it was sold to us as just
authentic.
It was sold as a conversation between the new Secretary of State and the YALI alumni. But when you listen to the questions, when you see the video and you see the interactions, it almost seems as though people were briefed about what to ask, and that there was some sort of preparation from Anthony. And of course, nobody goes into these kinds of things without knowing, like preparing for questions that might come in. But his answers were, he didn't even take time to think. He just went in like, did you know they were going to ask this? So for me, it didn't really have that authenticity. That for me, it was the main thing that was missing.
So, I mean, I'll tell you, one thing I want to mention, and this is not me hating, is I've always wondered about the efficiency and efficacy of the Young African Leadership Initiative in the way that it's been rolled out. And the way that I want to compare it is, let's compare it to Idol's America's Top Chef and Real Housewives of Atlanta or anything like that. And I'm going to explain why I'm saying that. On Idols, you get people from the street who have passion, who have talent, but they've not yet been discovered. And you give them platform so that they can actually get discovered and start the journey. So that's how we find certain artists and then start enjoying their music through that platform. America, what is it, Top Chef, etc. does the same thing. But Real Housewives of Atlanta and all of these other shows, they find established people and they just profile them for our entertainment. So what has this got to do with the conversation that we're having now is the following. When you look at some of the people who've been awarded the YALI scholarships, some of them were already members of parliament. Some of them were already leaders of opposition in parliament. And those are not people who need to be discovered. They are already doing the specific thing. Now the question then becomes, has YALI become this CV addition for established middle-class Black Africans who are already connected or political? Or is it authentically a vehicle for finding and equipping young African voices? And I'm not sure that it's the latter and probably is more of the former.
Yeah, and I think the last thing that we need in Africa is another boys' club where people who are associated or part of certain networks and certain organizations sort of all meet and congregate and give each other opportunities and build together at the expense or leaving out people who might not have the opportunities to participate in such programs, but who do have a passion and are doing work in their communities at a smaller scale and actually making a difference to the lives of those around them, which is what the initiative has been sold to us as that is its objective and mission.
Yeah, so I'll agree. I'll agree with that. And let's keep it short. Let's keep it tight. Let's go to question. I think it was 4, right?
Okay.
Question 4 from Kenya.
Yeah.
So this is what the question said.
And now I will be moving forward to Kenya and take a question from Billion.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Hi, my name is Billion Okoth-Ojiwa. I am a 2018 Mandela Washington Fellow. I was in civic leadership track at the University of Delaware. My question is, how can we inspire the youth of today to overcome their acceptance of the status quo in becoming and become the leaders of tomorrow? And how can the United States and Kenya continue to partner to provide youth and young leaders with skills and resources they need to bring about the change they want to see in the world?
Well, first of all, you're doing it. You and your colleagues in the YALI program are doing it, and that's incredibly inspiring. And I think in doing it, you're also setting an incredibly powerful example for your friends, your colleagues, your communities. And that's going to have ripple effects that I don't think you can even fully appreciate. There are even younger people today inspired by what you're doing and what you've done, and and they can see a different path forward as a result of that. And that, I think, in itself is going to encourage people to stand up, speak out, be engaged, and try to advance beyond the status quo. But look, we know that to really feel engaged and to really be inspired, people need to feel that they're being heard, because speaking into a void can be an incredibly frustrating exercise. So I think young voices are critical to any political discourse, for example, on electoral and constitutional reforms. And that's certainly true in the run-up to elections in 2022 in Kenya. We're supporting a whole variety of programs to try to build the capacity of youth organizations to come together in a constructive way to help young people develop resilience against political manipulation and violence, to advocate for more inclusive governance and accountability. And the YALI family, especially alumni of the civic engagement track like you, I think, again, you're playing in a really important role in this. And the inspiration that you're providing is, more than anything else, the most powerful force that we have going. And let me add one other thing. I've been around and doing this kind of work for a little while. And I know that even with every effort I might make and my colleagues make to have open minds and fresh perspectives, the older you get, the harder it is. Everyone gets a little bit set in their ways, set in their thinking. And the most important thing we have is to hear and to listen to new voices, young voices, fresh perspectives, new ideas. No one has a monopoly on ideas, never mind good ideas. And as you're bringing these ideas to the marketplace of ideas, it's going to make for a much more powerful and abundant market. And I think that's the way we get progress. So we have to have open ears and open minds, and you have to step up. And I'm so glad that you're doing that and really leading by example. Baholo, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
So that was the first question that we're going to look at, the question from Kenya. What are your thoughts on that question?
So it wasn't a very hard-hitting question, like something that you'd expect from upcoming African leaders. I think it was very soft, and considering really where America is coming from after the years of Trump, which were very, very dry for Africa, one would expect that there would be far more hard-hitting questions that wants to know what is the Biden administration going to do to accelerate
and what would you, can you tell us how to inspire? Come on, African people are already inspired to solve their problem. There's something about a problem that when it's burning, you are inspired. You are already inspired to solve it by virtue of the problem itself. You don't need additional inspiration to solve something that's burning. So I agree.
I mean, 10 years of YALI is already inspiration enough.
I mean, come on. People want to be on YALI. People are inspired to lead Africa. That's already happening. And the reason why we chose this question is to show that of the 10 questions, and this would be my comment on it, is you've got 10 questions for the US Secretary of State. You are the young African leaders. You've gone through all of these hoops and all of these CVs that you had to prove. Why are we asking this man when we only have 10 questions in an hour about how can we inspire the youth? First, what does he know about inspiring African youth? He's an American. He's an elderly American man. He doesn't know. He cannot tell you that thing. He can only speculate. That's the kind of question you ask Benna Boy if ever you bump into him. But there were questions, and this is not the only one, and we encourage you to go watch the whole thing. There were questions that were just soft questions. How can we do arts with America? Those questions are not helpful in a limited question and answer session where you've already sent the questions in advance. Right? So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
I mean, I think looking at everything that's happening globally, there was so much more that could have come out of just that question and all the other 10 questions. And I just feel like this did not address the things that are at the forefront.
Should we judge Kenya for this? Should we say, Kenya, that's your guy. This your guy is asking this question now.
We're benching him.
No, your guy is not first team. Huh? That was not a first team question. That was not a YALI Division 1. Huh? Anyway, let's go to the question that came from Zimbabwe. So we're going to play it and then we're going to tell you what we thought about it. So here's the question now.
So our next question is coming from Zimbabwe by Mantate. Mantate?
Yes. Thank you so much, Woholo. My name is Mantate Mlojwa, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Secretary. I'm from Zimbabwe, and I'm a 2018 alumni from the Regional Leadership Center in South Africa, where I was in the civic leadership track. So as someone that's very passionate about democracy and governance, I see that there's a lot of violence in countries like Zimbabwe where they kidnap and attack opposition and civil society leaders. The insurgencies in Mozambique, for instance, and the ethnic conflict in Ethiopia. So my question really is about the policy position of the United States where unresolved violence is concerned, past and present.
So this is something that we have to, and we are paying attention to, security concerns as well as to democracy and human rights. And unfortunately, what we've seen is backsliding on both fronts in a number of places across Africa. And I have to say that we're concerned about these trends, both rising insecurity and also diminishing adherence to democratic standards and human rights. Ultimately, inclusive, accessible democracies are the most crucial thing to moving countries away from cycles of violence and onto a path of peace and stability and development. What we found through experience and what history suggests is that the countries that enjoy transparent, accountable governance and that deliver services for their people face fewer social grievances and ensure that the public actually is invested in building a stronger future because they can see it, they can feel it. So if governance, if democratic governance is able to effectively deliver what people need and give them a voice in the system, that is ultimately the way that you deal with violence, you prevent it from erupting in the first place, and you strengthen democracy and human rights. So we're very much committed to working with partners to advance peace and security in Africa. In the short term, sometimes that looks like security partnerships, conflict mitigation support, and diplomatic advocacy on human rights. Ultimately, I think the most important thing that we can do is to help countries where possible strengthen their democratic institutions, strengthen the ability to deliver progress for people, economic growth, and that's the real foundation that we need to put in place. But that takes time. And in the meantime, some of these programs and partnerships to deal with the immediate challenges are what's most important.
So what are your thoughts on this particular question? I think it's a good question. What do you think?
That was actually a very relevant question. That was one of the more relevant questions. And especially coming from a SADC citizen and looking at, and as we've discussed.
She didn't waste a chance.
Exactly. And looking at the things that we've discussed, especially with the ongoing violence in Mozambique and the threat that has for the entire Southern African region, that was a question that I think was very good. However, I just feel as though the answer from Anthony Blinken was then what was lacking.
Yeah.
He did not even make mention of the stuff in Mozambique, even considering the fact that the US actually has sent support to Mozambique. So speak more on that. Let us know. He spoke briefly and skirted over things and spoke about projects and initiatives to help, but not really narrowing in and zeroing in on anything specific when we have a whole thing unraveling and other conflicts. So tell us, you've got an opportunity to be specific because there are things happening that the United States is actively involved in. Let's hear about it.
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing, and I've said this before in the podcast. You can go listen out when I was reviewing his first speech. The first thing that I want to say is that America has the opportunity to participate in a bigger way in Africa than in other places where they're trying to participate. It's almost impossible to fix the Middle East because oil is flowing. The big players, they have got access to oil money, and they've got access to weapons that some of them came from America. And there's a lot of extremism in the region that is already there. So trying to fix Afghanistan, trying to fix Iraq, trying to fix Yemen, these places, you're going to throw buckets of money, but the return on your spend is going to be negligible. But in Africa, $1 billion can go very far. But the billions are being spent on military spend in the Middle East, and very little is being spent on Africa. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to say is the question was very specific, but the answer that we got was a pattern that Anthony Blinken has. He's a career diplomat. His parents were in the diplomatic community, and you can see the diplomacy oozing. That was a non-answer, because what he does is, what does he do? He expresses concern. We're concerned, we're concerned, we're concerned. Then he expresses value. These are the values that we stand for. Then he gives an economics input, and then he says, if countries are prospering economically, you won't see as much of these things. But that's not the question. The question is, what is the American foreign policy on abuse, violence, electoral fraud? In fact, she was asking, what are you going to do? Where are we as Africa on your agenda list? Bobby Wine recently was under house arrest. There was massive violence, brutality, electoral suppression in Uganda in January when you were coming in. There's been a lot that has happened. Last year, there was a Zimbabwean Flags Matter. There's DRC is burning or dying hashtag. There's conflict right now in Cameroon between the Anglophones and the Saxophones.
Francophones.
Francophones. Anglophones and Francophones. There is conflict in the Tigray region right now in Ethiopia. There has been a terror attack in March in Mozambique. And that's just to mention a few. There's ongoing terror in the Sahel region affecting Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. There is a lot going on. And you are speaking to the youth, and they're specifically asking you, what's your policy on this? And then you give them a very blah, blah, blah answer. Great diplomatic answer, but when we're now marking for substance, when we are looking at, because we are African youth, we saw your answer and we're like, you are a great speaker, great form, great delivery, zero substance. Zero substance. Everything you said, every African already knows.
Yeah.
But also the other thing I wanted to say as a last point, you tell us that, economic input can improve the situation. But what is America doing to make those kind of economic inputs?
Yeah. And I think actually that actually even reminds me and leads me to the question from the DRC.
Yeah.
And when you're speaking about it, and she actually asked specifically about, the resources and the equitable resource sharing between, the DRC African countries and Western countries of the United States. And again, last year there was that issue, as you brought up, about the child labor and slave labor in the DRC for minerals that are used specifically in the manufacturing of iPhones, and Apple being one of the biggest companies in America, which we know will then bring a lot of tax revenue for them. We want to hear you deal with that, if you discuss
for
your
10
own,
points.
exactly, your own companies. And he speaks a lot in, I think it was when he was discussing with the African leaders though, and sort of beating his chest about, sorry, that was actually another diplomat that was beating their chest about how, American businesses want to be, they want to be more corporate,
responsible.
Yes, responsible, but then now we hear about how big American companies are contributing to human rights atrocities in Africa.
Yeah.
I did not hear him address that enough.
And we haven't spoken enough about that conversation, because all of these smart devices, all of these cars, one, catalytic converters need platinum, and they need some other rare minerals from Africa. Catalytic converters are in most cars, most of the modern cars. Then you've got the coltan, which is used as one of the elements that you need for the batteries, and there's other rare minerals that basically make up your smartphone, your tablets, and other electronic devices. And these minerals go to China, and then the Chinese factories make the stuff, but they are making it for American buyers.
Yes.
So it's designed by Apple in America, made by Foxconn in China, using minerals from the DRC. So at some point, you are involved in this. Tesla, all of these companies, they're involved. They are benefiting. But what they get to do is to stick their fancy, glossy branding on harsh practices which are adverse to the communities that are producing those minerals. There's an interesting documentary on wealth in the DRC, and I can't remember who made it. I think it was DW or something. You must look it up. Maybe we'll link it in the comments just so you can access it. And you can see the hectic quality of life for people who are mining coltan and then cobalt or whatever it's called. And they're going through a lot. Yeah. So, that answer, the DRC answer, and go watch it, you see for yourself, it was very vague. But let's move on. Let's move to the last question now. And the last question and answer, the last question was around this topic of China. Let the man ask his question.
My name is Wezam. I'm a 2019 Mandela Washington Fellow, Business and Entrepreneurship track from Northwestern University. My question is this. Considering the growth of China's influence in Africa, will the US be competing with China in Africa, especially as it pertains to Africa's growth over the next few years?
Thank you. Wazam, that's, again, a very important question. And let me say a few things to that. First, Africa, countries in Africa will and should engage with a broad array of partners, whether it's China or France, Turkey or Brazil, the United States, or many others. And my hope is that African countries and African communities just approach those relationships with your eyes wide open. China is a global competitor, and competition is a good thing as long as it's basically fair and the playing field is level. But as we look at it, we have different approaches to governance. We have different approaches to business. We have different approaches to security, and the fundamentals sometimes of our partnerships are quite different. We believe, the United States believes, that a free and open rules-based order that we espouse, sometimes imperfectly, but that is our that is what we espouse, is a good model for people around the world to realize their full potential. It's been for us, and we believe that that holds true, not unique to the United States. In Africa and around the world, we'll continue to, for example, promote entrepreneurship, fair business practices, sound environmental and social standards for development assistance. Because what we really need to see, wherever it is a race to the top, not a race to the bottom, to make sure that as we engage in business, as we engage in development, as we engage in assistance, we're also paying strong attention to environmental concerns, to worker rights, to transparency, to other vital things that make for sustainable and equitable growth and opportunity. So what we're going to be doing, at least, is supporting good governance and strong democratic institutions, transparency with our aid. People will know where it goes, what it delivers, who benefits, and they'll actually be engaged in its implementation. Transparency is vital. That's something we're strongly behind. Fighting corruption to make sure that when countries invest, when businesses engage, that's free from corruption, which is one of the most corrosive things to democracy imaginable. And we will speak out on human rights. Ultimately, as we look at this, government should be of, by, and for the people, and serve the needs of the people. And these are all pretty big distinctions, at least right now, between the way we look at this and the way the authorities in Beijing look at it. So it's a long way of saying we're not asking anyone to choose between the United States or China, but I would encourage you to ask those tough questions, to dig beneath the surface, to demand transparency, and to make informed choices about what is best for you and your countries. If someone is coming along and saying, I'm going to invest a lot of money in your country, but it's a loan, so that means you have a debt, and you're going to have to pay it back someday. And if that debt is too great and you can't pay it back, then I'm going to own the asset in question. Well, you should look carefully at that, because assuming too much debt becomes an unsustainable burden on countries, and then they face an incredibly hard choice between having to pay it back and probably pay it back in ways that takes resources away from the people, or hand over whatever the investment was to whoever made the investment and owns the debt. You should be looking hard at whether when other countries come in to build a big infrastructure project, are they bringing their own workers with them, or are they giving jobs to people in the country where they're making investments? What are the environmental standards? What are the standards for workers and their rights who are working on these projects? Is there transparency about where the money's going? All of those things are things that are important to dig into, and anyone who's making an investment should be held to a very high standard. So we're, for our part, going to remain focused on Africa. We believe in Africa. We believe in the extraordinary potential. We believe that it's necessary, because when you have such a huge proportion of the world's population in Africa, and that's only growing, everyone has a stake in Africa's growth and success, because it's going to contribute to the world, not just to Africa. Your success is our success, and we want to invest in it, but in the right way.
So what do you think about that question and the answer from the secretary?
So I'll tell you one thing. I don't think the secretary is doing a good job in answering the questions, because the question was really, is America going to compete with China for African investment? And I think he was like, values, we have a different value system, we have different trade policy approach, whatever. But that's not the question. The question is, China is ahead of you. Are you going to compete? And just to put it in context so that everyone gets the factual context, the US is Africa's third largest trading partner. They are behind China, and they are behind the European Union, right? And this is data that has been compiled by USAID, USAID, yeah, which is basically, I always say USAID, but it's US, it's not aid, but it's, whatever. So that's their data. They're saying they're number 3 to China and the EU.
Yeah.
That's the world's largest economy. The world's largest, there's a mismatch because the world's largest economy should be the world's largest trading partner with Africa.
Yeah.
The number 2 should be number 2.
Yes.
And the EU should be number 3. But the fact is, America does not value Africa in the right way. And sometimes you can see this in the way American companies behave. Spotify, how long did they take to come to Africa?
Yeah.
We had Apple Music before we had Spotify. Spotify only thought about Africa when they needed to get more subscriber numbers for their IPO. That's when they did an Africa rollout. It was almost an insult to our intelligence because the whole time Spotify thought we don't listen to music. Spotify thought we can't pay subscription, and they have a free subscription anyway. It's not like they had to do anything. It's just one of those videos not available in your country for no reason. Like, what are you doing? I'm gonna still listen to songs. Like, I have options. Even if I don't pay for those options, I've got multiple options. Spotify could have been in Africa from day one. They just did not take us seriously. That's the problem that happens with American companies. Even the way Twitter verifies accounts and all of that stuff, you can just see American companies don't take us seriously. And the question was, are you going to compete? There's many ways to compete. They're not competing. But just to give people more perspective, this is the value of China-Africa trade in 2019. 192 billion US dollars. 192 billion US dollars. Convert that to African currency. It's a lot. China is doing a lot of trade with Africa. But not only that, China has provided from the year 2000 to 2017, 143 billion worth of loans to African states, governments, state-owned enterprises. 143 billion on top of the 192 billion in trade. Now, let me give you the America statistics. US has two-way trade between Africa and the US of 39 billion. 39, as opposed to America's 192. Right? They're almost 5 times bigger than you in trade volume. They're the number 2 economy, but they're running laps around you. The question was, are you going to participate more? And China is using what is called debt trap diplomacy. They're borrowing money to African states at bad interest rates in the hope that those African states default, and they're either under the soft control of China or under the hard control of China, having to give up ports and other things so that the Belt and Road Initiative can succeed. And that's the China supply chain plan, which has been rolled out. And that's what's happening. If you are America and you want to be dominant, logic would dictate to me that I'm number 1, but number 2 is heating up. And part of number 2's heat is coming from Africa. I must now compete when number 2 is strong so that I can slow them down. Otherwise, I won't be number 1 forever. I feel like you didn't answer the question.
At all. It seemed more as though he was selling America's style of investment and their style of...
But your style is 39 billion of trade.
Exactly.
So at the end of the day, what are we doing?
Exactly.
Because, when we're talking about business, the numbers...
the numbers speak.
The
numbers speak.
This is what the man was asking.
You're not putting people in bad loans, and that was not the question.
What are we going to do with that information?
Well, what is it helping us with now anyway? What is it
and in fact, because China is doing this bad loan stuff, you must provide good loans. And you must even provide debt forgiveness. So, because the whole thing is that the reality right now is that a lot of African debt is already, you're not going to get that money back, wherever you are. The money is gone. It's in mansions, it's in Dubai, it's in iPhones with 2 SIM cards. It's somewhere. It's slaves have got it, whoever has got it, but it's not in the hands of the state anymore. It has gone. It has been bounced, it has been chowed. They've chowed the money. They've savannah that money. It's in their throats. It's gone. So the question then really is, what are your strategic interests? You have money. You want to remain a global player, the dominant player. You want your value system to be the dominant value system in the world. What does that require from you? It doesn't. look, I just think Blinken the whole time, and this goes back to what you were saying, that it was very PR.
Very PR.
And I want to say something, I don't think I mentioned it. I also thought about the efficacy of this whole game, because they say they've got 24,000 alumni for YALI. And at the time that we were recording this video, only 6,000 people have watched it on YouTube. And it got me wondering, even the alumni didn't watch the presentation. Who are you communicating to? If you're Secretary of State and you're trying to speak to the youth, sure, you're speaking to your YALI guys, but this is a public engagement. You're trying to communicate with the youth of Africa.
Yeah.
Did you succeed? I mean, we would watch because this is right up our alley. But
are you trying to get to us?
What about the guy whose alley is not right up? What about that guy? Did you get that guy?
Have you reached him?
I don't think they did.
Did you travel on his street?
Even the AU has the same problem. They'll talk about we want to reach the youth, want to reach the youth. You look at their Twitter engagements, their YouTube engagement, there's nothing going on. These people are not serious about reaching out to us as young people, as young Africans, as the people who are going to live in the future that is currently being created. And I think I'm going to ask for your last thoughts, but for me, just to let you, before you go on with the last thoughts, every African has to realize these old people are not going to deliver anything for you. They are invested in the status quo, and because now the system has become so big, 1.3 billion people, close to 1.4, everyone just wants to make sure Africa stays stable. That's why they're always talking about peace and peace and peace and peace. As long as guns are not firing in Africa, everyone thinks they're doing a good job. They're not going to help us create a better Africa. We must forget about them. We must forget about them. They're not coming. Don't expect the people who are winning certificates and getting opportunities to go away to help you either. They're in the status quo. They're enjoying. The status quo is not going to be changed by these institutions that currently exist. Just that's what I'm seeing. So I think this whole exchange was very PR, very let's manage the moment, as opposed to like a genuine overture to young Africans from the American Secretary of State. But that's just me. What are your final thoughts?
I think I just want to jump on and echo on what you're saying about how, sort of the old guard is cementing the status quo. And I do feel to some extent, and from what we've even seen from this interaction between Secretary Blinken and the YALI alumni, is that just from that engagement, you can see that they're not really looking to change anything, and participating in something like this is also participating in cementing the old guard and the status quo and the way of doing things, because he did he really was very proud to mention the fact that so many of the alumni have gone on to take on leadership positions in business and in governance,
some of them were already there
in Africa.
Bali Ntuli was already a leader. Lindiwe Mazibuko was already where she was. This certificate didn't anyway. It's a story for another day. Finish your point, my friend.
But I think what that also tells us is that if you've got this network and this group, and you have fed or taught them, or that you guys are united by a common way of seeing democracy and seeing economics and whatnot, those people go into leadership and they take that with them. So if you've got the old guard that's taking the new people who are going into leadership and sort of, indoctrinating them into the same way of thought and the same way of thinking, the same way of doing, all we're doing is that we're taking new young faces into leadership spaces, but with the same attitudes and the same way of doing things as what we're trying to get away from, as what we've seen does not work and has not been effective for decades and decades and decades. So I think you were saying earlier on that this YALI project is a bit of a soft diplomacy type of thing from the United States of America.
Right. So I don't know what you guys think. We're more than keen to hear your views on the topic. Comments. I always laugh when the YouTubers do what they need to do, but you need to do it. It's part of the process. Comment, like, share, subscribe, all of that stuff, all of that good stuff. Let's have the conversation. We're going to read the comments. We're going to jump in there as well. Continue the conversation if you like this. If you also have suggestions for stuff you think you want to hear us just discuss and look at in a fresh way with data, with real analysis, sober, honest analysis. Oftentimes, spaces in the media are just dishonest, and that's the real challenge. But if you're keen, even if you like our little cushion there, like it's a little addition that we got. But yeah, if you're keen, let's do it. Let's do it. Let us know. That's all for this episode. Catch you in the next one.